So, as if. We've seen this phrase before. It's wonderfully ambiguous, don't you think? Tolkien really does seem to love to give us options when wondering, what's happening in a passage. So the big question is, was someone else acting upon Legolas to keep him from bending his bow? Was it the will of the old beggar man that they saw walking the woods below them? Hello everybody, welcome to Aude and Tulava, where we are walking our way through Tolkien's Legendarium, looking for new insights and a greater understanding of the works we all love. Today we are starting chapter 5 of book 3, The White Rider. As we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, grab a version of the books you don't have in the description below, or join the channel membership community if you would like to support the channel that way. We also have a couple of great deals for you in the description. You can get 15% off artisanal tea and coffee from Chapters Tea and Coffee, and also get money off your closing costs when you refinance or purchase a new home with Rocket Mortgage. Links, again, are in the description. All right, let's dive in. Now, we are back with the three hunters. Remember, after the last chapter with them, they were just heading to sleep when they realized their horses had run off after they had, had what seemed to be a close encounter with Saruman. We catch up with them in the morning of the next day. "My very bones are chilled," said Gimli, flapping his arms and stamping his feet. Day had come at last. At dawn, the companions had made such breakfast as they could. Now in the growing light, they were getting ready to search the ground again for signs of the hobbits. "And do not forget that old man," said Gimli. "I should be happier if I could see the print of a boot." "Why would that make you happy?" said Legolas. "Because an old man with feet that leaves marks might be no more than he seemed," answered the dwarf. "Maybe," said the elf, "but a heavy boot might leave no print here. The grass is deep and springy." "That would not baffle a ranger," said Gimli. "A bent blade is enough for Aragorn to read, but I do not expect him to find any traces. It was an evil phantom of Saruman that we saw last night. I'm sure of it, even under the light of morning. His eyes are looking out on us from Fangorn, even now, maybe." "It is likely enough," said Aragorn. "Yet I am not sure. I am thinking of the horses. You said that last night, Gimli, that they were scared away. But I do not think so. Did you hear them, Legolas? Did they sound to you like beasts in terror?" "No," said Legolas. "I heard them clearly, but for the darkness and our own fear, I should have guessed that they were beasts wild with some sudden gladness. They spoke as horses will when they meet a friend that they have long missed." So a bit of a longer passage to start with, but I thought it was important to kind of get, the whole context. So one, Gimli's cold, but not just cold, chilled to the bones. Sounds like it was a rough night, probably a little chilly. After all, it is March 1st, which brings us to an interesting point. So looking in Appendix B, which is good to keep handy when we have these interlacing chapters, we see that March 1st is also the second day of the Entmoot. Tomorrow will be the day the moot ends, and the Ents reach Isengard in the evening of the 3rd, like the following day. Now, while Legolas and Gimli discuss the skill of Aragorn, Aragorn essentially says, "Yeah, sure, but I'm thinking about the horses." He doesn't say what he thinks yet, but sounds a bit like, a leading question to Legolas. And Legolas thinks they were really just suddenly happy, not frightened. So from what I see, clearly Aragorn agrees, but he can't solve the full riddle now. They really need to try and see what they can find of the hobbits, and Aragorn starts looking. He came to the ashes of the watchfire near the riverbank, and then began to retrace the ground back towards the knoll where the battle had been fought. Suddenly he stooped and bent low, and his face almost in the grass. Then he called to the others. They came running up. "Here at last we find news," said Aragorn. He lifted up a broken leaf for them to see, a large pale leaf of golden hue, now fading and turning brown. "Here a Malorn leaf of Lorien, and there are small crumbs on it, and a few more crumbs in the grass. And see, there are some pieces of cut cord lying nearby." "And here is the knife that cut them," said Gimli. He stooped and drew out of a tussock, into which some heavy foot had trampled it, a short, jagged blade. The half from which it had been snapped was beside it. "It is an orc weapon," he said, holding it gingerly and looking with disgust at the carved handle. It had been shaped like a hideous head with squinting eyes and leering mouth. So the hunters are uncovering clue after clue, leading them to figure out what actually happened to their little friends. Obviously, we know the little riddle here, but to some, namely Legolas and Gimli, they're stumped. The next paragraph, we see Legolas getting to be a bit frustrated. At least that's kind of how I'm starting to read. How did he cut the ropes on the wrist? How did he even get the knife? He cut off the ropes and was just so pleased with himself. He sat and ate in the midst of danger and then flew away? Yeah, we just need wings and we'll follow him ourselves. Before now, in this read through, I just thought Legolas was kind of making a joke, ha ha ha. But as I continually go through and learn more about how Tolkien really carefully wrote everything, I think Legolas here is frustrated. It's that kind of a nigh hysterical yelling and postulating with crazy ideas, because you just can't make heads or tails of it anymore. Gimli seems to agree with Legolas, but takes him more seriously and calls the whole thing sorcery. But why not ask what the professional thinks of it all? Can Aragorn come up with a better solution than Legolas? Maybe I could, said Aragorn, smiling. There are some other signs near at hand that you have not considered. I agree that the prisoner was a hobbit and must have had either legs or hands free before he came here. I guess that it was hands because the riddle then becomes easier, and also because, as I read the marks, he was carried to this point by an orc. Blood was spilled here a few paces away, orc blood. There are deep prints of hooves all around the spot, and signs that a heavy thing was dragged away. The orc was slain by horsemen, and later his body was hauled to the fire. But the hobbit was not seen. He was not in the open, for it was night and he still had his elven cloak. He was exhausted and hungry, and it is not to be wondered at that, when he had cut his bonds with the knife of his fallen enemy, he rested and ate a little before he crept away. But it is some comfort to know that he had some lembas in his pocket, even though he ran away without gear or pack. That perhaps is like a hobbit. I say he, although I hope and guess that both Merry and Pippin were here together. There is, however, nothing to show that for certain. As we know from, reading the previous chapter, Aragorn is pretty much right on. But what we can see from his explanation is they still don't really have any idea how any of this happened. They know the basics of what happened, but how did they get their hands free enough to even use the knife? We still don't know. We know an orc carried them to that spot, but we don't know why. But we do get to see Aragorn's sick tracking skills highlighted here, because he's basically right in everything he says. So they keep looking for the hobbits, and rather than start the walk through Rohan, they start picking their way into Fangorn. It was not long before Aragorn found fresh signs. At one point, near the bank of the Entwash, he came upon footprints, hobbit prints, but too light for much to be made of them. Then again, beneath the bole of a great tree on the very edge of the wood, more prints were discovered. The earth was bare and dry and did not reveal much. One hobbit at least stood here for a while and looked back, and then he turned away into the forest, said Aragorn. I do not think the wood feels evil, whatever tales may say, said Legolas. He stood under the eaves of the forest, stooping forward as if he were listening and peering with wide eyes into the shadows. No, it is not evil, or what evil is in it is far away. I catch only the faintest echoes of dark places where the hearts of the trees are black. There is no malice near us, but there is watchfulness and anger. Well, it has no cause to be angry with me, said Gimli. I have done it no harm. That is just as well, said Legolas, but nonetheless it has suffered harm. There is something happening inside, or going to happen. Do you not feel the tenseness? It takes my breath. I feel the air is stuffy, said the dwarf. This wood is lighter than Mirkwood, but it is musty and shabby. It is old, very old, said the elf. So old that almost I feel young again, as I have not felt since I journeyed with you children. It is old and full of memory. I could have been happy here if I had come in days of peace. I dare say you could, snorted Gimli. You are a wood elf anyway, though elves of any kind are strange folk. Yet you comfort me. Where you go, I will go, but keep your bow ready to hand, and I will keep my axe loose in my belt. Not for use on trees, he added hastily, looking up at the tree under which they stood. I do not wish to meet that old man at unawares without an argument ready at hand. That is all. Let us go. I had to cut out part of the section, otherwise it was just too long. But there are quite a few things to go over. First, they find some prints, and Aragorn remarks that at least one of the hobbits stood and looked back. This is most likely the spot where the hobbits stopped right at the end of chapter 3. They watched the beginning of Ugluk's last stand, but didn't see him fall for fear that, he would escape and come into the woods after him. But the really important part, which I didn't really pick up on until reading this through again multiple times and checking on the timeline. So there's some back and forth with Gimli and Legolas. They both admit the forest, feels. But Gimli thinks it feels evil. Legolas thinks it might just be angry. Legolas pulls another moment out, like in Howland, where he spoke to the rocks. He's giving us an insight into the forest. It has suffered harm. It's not like the old forest by the Shire, as it really doesn't have any malice, just anger at how it's been treated. Then he mentions the tenseness. Remember, this is the second day of the Entmoot. While the hobbits are having a good time with Bragelad, the other Ents are in serious conversation of whether they are going to war or not. It's not an easy decision. That is what Legolas is feeling here. We see it in the next day when the Ents finally decide, when they feel the air all but sparking. But the hunters will be obviously long gone by then. And of course, the end of this little conversation is my favorite part. This is where we see the friendship of Gimli and Legolas really starting to flourish. Gimli makes fun of Legolas for thinking he could live happily in the old shabby forest, where at happier days. Wood elves obviously are strange folk. Now, it's not exactly hobbitry at its finest, but it's not something most people would say to someone they don't like. It's a friendship comment. More and more, we see them becoming close friends, and it's just something I love to see throughout the book. Now, as they continue in the forest, Aragorn finds more traces of the hobbits. So it was that he came upon the place where Merry and Pippin had drunk and bathed their feet. "This is good tidings," said Aragorn. "Yet the marks are 2 days old, and it seems that at this point the hobbits left the waterside." "Then what shall we do now?" said Gimli. "We cannot pursue them through the whole fastness of Fangorn. We have come ill-supplied. If we do not find them soon, we shall be of no use to them, except to sit down beside them and show our friendship by starving together." "If that is all we can do, then we must do that," said Aragorn. "Let us go on." They came at length to the steep, abrupt end of Treebeard's Hill, and looked up at the rock wall with its rough steps leading to the high shelf. Gleams of sun were striking through the hurrying clouds, and the forest now looked less gray and drear. So even without cajoling us into double-checking the Tale of Years in Appendix B every few lines, Tolkien finds ways to keep reminding us where we are in the interlacing. We've jumped backwards 2 days. We're just behind Merry and Pippin. We'll catch up to them in a couple chapters. And here we see for sure both hobbits were present, confirming it for the hunters. But we continue to see what I guess I'll call questionable decision-making. Gimli does make a decent point about wandering around Fangorn and dying of hunger eventually. Though this does seem a bit pessimistic considering the hunting prowess of Aragorn and I'm assuming Legolas. But Aragorn says, "Yep, we're just going to keep chasing after them no matter the cost." Now, while I say questionable decision making, I can respect that, and it's probably just because I know what's been happening to the hobbits. But that seems, I don't know, a little silly to me. I'm sure someone can pop in here and tell me why I'm wrong or how this fits into the heroic story because of this section in the Elder Edda or something. I'm just not that well read. But I can admire Aragorn's push here. We will find them no matter what. We will make sure they're safe from the orcs and other evil things, and we will die doing it if we have to. Better to die together and free than in captivity. I mean, I get it, but I also wonder why. Honestly, probably never know. As we saw at the end of the passage, they found the hill where the hobbits met Treebeard. Obviously, they're going up the hill. The companions climbed up. Aragorn came last, moving slowly. He was scanning the steps and ledges closely. "I'm almost sure that the hobbits have been up here," he said. "But there are other marks, very strange marks, which I do not understand. I wonder if we can see anything from this ledge, which will help us to guess which way they went next." So despite Aragorn's skill in tracking, we've finally stumped him. He doesn't know that the marks he's seeing are from 7-toed feet with a, tough skin like bark carrying a 14-foot tall creature who's stronger than a troll. And honestly, I'm blaming Elrond for his lack of education here. But as the hunters look around and marvel how far they've come out of their way, something catches Legolas's eye. "Hush, speak more softly, look," said Legolas, pointing. "Down in the wood, back in the way that we have just come, it is he. Can you not see him passing from tree to tree?" I see now," hissed Gimli. "Look, Aragorn, did I not warn you? There is the old man, all in dirty gray rags. That is why I could not see him at first." Aragorn looked and beheld a bent figure moving slowly. It was not far away. It looked like an old beggar man, walking wearily, leaning on a rough staff. His head was bowed and he did not look towards them. In other lands they would have greeted him with kind words, but now they stood silent, each feeling a strange expectancy. Something was approaching that held a hidden power or menace. Just let that sit for a second. The three hunters could do nothing at the moment. Instead of only Legolas feeling the expectancy, the tenseness of Fangorn on the verge of boiling over, they all feel it. There was a hidden power approaching them, not just a power though, a menace. They all knew it. They were in danger. Gimli gazed with wide eyes for a while as step by step the figure drew nearer. Then suddenly, unable to contain himself longer, he burst out. "Your bow, Legolas! Bend it! Get ready! It is Saruman. Do not let him speak or put a spell upon us. Shoot first." Legolas took his bow and bent it slowly, and if some other will resisted him. He held an arrow loosely in his hand but did not fit it to the string. Aragorn stood silent. His face was watchful and intent. So Gimli obviously thinks it's Saruman. He encourages Legolas to shoot. But you see what happens here. Legolas went to bend the bow, but slowly, as if some other will resisted him. So, as if. We've seen this phrase before. It's wonderfully ambiguous, don't you think? Tolkien really does seem to love to give us options when wondering, what's happening in a passage. So the big question is, was someone else acting upon Legolas to keep him from bending his bow? Was it the will of the old beggar man that they saw walking the woods below them? Was it maybe Eru making sure they did not fire on the man before they got a chance to meet him? Was it just Legolas' own will, not wanting to shoot an unsuspecting old man without warning? Or was it something, I don't know, deep inside Legolas, not wanting to shoot for a different, more important reason? If you've read the book, you know who the beggar is, so it's good he didn't shoot. But the big question is why? I look at it kind of like Schrodinger's cat. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, basically a researcher, Schrodinger, had a cat in a box that he couldn't see. Because he couldn't see it, he could not verify if the cat was dead or alive. Therefore, he postulated that the cat was essentially dead and alive at the same time because he could not verify it without looking. I know I probably butchered it, but hopefully you kind of get the idea. What I'm saying is, what is the reason from all the options above that, and any other ones I didn't think of, that Legolas didn't shoot the strange beggar? Why? All of them at once, I suppose. Now, while Legolas is delaying his decision to attack, the old man comes to the bottom of the hill. At last, the old man broke the silence. "Well met indeed, my friends," he said in a soft voice. "I wish to speak with you. Will you come down or shall I come up?" Without waiting for an answer, he began to climb. "Now," cried Gimli, "stop him, Legolas." "Did I not say that I wished to speak to you?" said the old man. "Put away that bow, Master Elf." The bow and arrow fell from Legolas' hands, and his arms hung loose at his sides. "And you, Master Dwarf, pray take your hand from your axe haft till I am up. You will not need such arguments." So two big things here to notice. First, even though Gimli encourages Legolas again to shoot the old man, the bow and arrow simply fell from his hands and his arms hung limply. This for sure seems like some outside will acting on him. If you were making the choice to not shoot someone, would you simply not shoot them? I feel like that's like the better option rather than like dropping everything. Here, it sure seems like the old man is forcing his will upon the elf. The second thing to notice is how the old man said, "You will not need such arguments." Like a page earlier, that was probably a couple hours in, Hunter's time, Gimli said he would not want to meet the old man unawares without an argument ready to hand. Now, one could assume that the old man was nearby and overheard them and threw Gimli's words back at him. I don't really think so, but one could assume. However, Gimli has consistently been of the opinion there was sorcery going on around them. Like how there could, not really be any footprints of the old man walking around their camp, even though they all saw him at night. So that must have really freaked Gimli out. So short story, totally relates. I was sophomore year in high school. So I was about 15 at the time. I was in band and we had a band tour where we went to a couple places, played at like a school and a church over the weekend. It was fun. We went to Medieval Times and my friend Brad and I were, being 15, asked our waitress at Medieval Times if we were supposed to call her a wench. Shame. She scowled at us and firmly told us her name was Paula. A few minutes after she left, Brad and I remarked to each other how we hoped, man, I don't want her to spit in our food. Mind you, a few minutes after she left. She came back after a while, put our food on the table in front of us, went on her way, down the table. But like 2 people down from us, she stopped, turned back to us and said, "Don't worry, I didn't spit in your food." What sorcery was this? We knew she was gone when we said anything about her doing that. We were very careful the rest of the evening to only speak well of dear Paula. Just think about it. The story was over 20 years ago and I still remember it very vividly. I bet Gimli told that story to everyone who would listen for however many years he kept living. And I bet his grandchildren, etc., were very tired of hearing that story. But yeah, now you know how dumb I was as a 15-year-old. Share your embarrassing teenage story in the comments below. Let's commiserate together. And the last passage does start saying Gimli started. Hearing those words freaked him out. Gimli started and then stood still as stone, staring while the old man sprang up the rough steps as nimbly as a goat. All weariness seemed to have left him. As he stepped up onto the shelf, there was a gleam, too brief for certainty, a quick glint of white, as if some garment shrouded by the gray rags had been for an instant revealed. The intake of Gimli's breath could be heard as a loud hiss in the silence. So not only was Gimli freaked out by what the old man said, as the old man stepped up the hill, the hunters caught a gleam of white. The true color of the garments revealed below the gray rags. The disguise was finally failing. Gimli now knew who they were facing. It was Saruman. And that is where we will be wrapping up for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, buy a new version of the book you don't already have, description below, or join the channel membership. And don't forget to claim your 15% off Chapters Tea and Coffee or your discount on closing costs with Rocket Mortgage. And until next time, always remember, out into the light, day shall come again.